Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. Very excited today. We apologize for the last few weeks, but we'll catch up. There is a lot to cover. I'm super stoked. Emotional intelligence. Everybody's excited about that topic. So um, please give me a thumbs up if you are hearing me okay, that this is working. Let's just make sure the technology is fine, and I will get started in a moment. So just checking. Let's make sure it's all good. I think we're fine. So let me get started. All right. Well, before we get into that, book launch coming up. It's delayed a little bit. We've had to review some things, but the book launch is happening. Um, in fact, today's topic is straight from the book. Okay. So we're doing part one, chapter 3. We've done chapter 1 and chapter 2. And over the coming weeks, I will continue to add value to what you get in the book by doing these educational sessions. So it's exciting. I'm loving that approach because there's just only so much you can put on paper. And when it comes to really explaining things, the best way to do that, I find, is in our master classes, in our courses, and hopefully these videos will help you to do that. So even if you don't join the courses, you can still access all the videos. And while you're reading the book, you can refer to these videos online. All right. So today's topic, emotional mastery, right? Understanding about the triggers and the pros and cons of emotions, and why we need to pay attention to those. And it's going to be a little bit different from what you've heard in the past about emotional intelligence. So before we dive into that, as I mentioned, if you want to do a recap of the last weeks, you can always go to the registration page and access those recordings, or go to my YouTube channel. That's probably the best place to go and grab those videos, as well as many other videos, podcasts, etc., that are on my YouTube channel. So what are we going to cover today? We're talking about the mastery level of emotion. So, understanding triggers, the ways to handle triggers. I'm going to give you some techniques on how to do that. The book will help you to do that as well. Getting the understanding the difference between control and mastery, right? They're two different things. And today we are talking about mastery. Okay. Emotional intelligence is important, but staying calm and trying to control that is not necessarily the best approach. And I'll talk about that. Techniques. So to help you, I'm going to give you a 4-step process and some things that you can do on your own over the coming weeks to improve your behavior intelligence that's triggered through emotion. So I want to constantly remind us that people can't read your mind. Your emotion are your own. How you act it out is your behavior intelligence. Okay. And that's what people observe. That's what people respond to. And so the behavior is really the only way to interact with other people. Your emotions are your own. How you manage those emotions is really the mastery that we are talking about today. What you do with that, what's the benefits, what's the pros and cons, etc. So I'm diving into all of that today. Again, that kind of repeats our agenda a little bit, just so that you know where we're headed and what we're going to do today. So let's start with a question. Have you considered, speak English, uh, what if your biggest emotional challenges became your greatest leadership strengths, benefits? Let me show you how to do that and why that's important for you to do that. All right. Your triggers. So let's talk about situations that maybe you've experienced over the last week, or the last 30 days. When did you get triggered by a situation that you responded quickly without really considering the consequences? That was faster than you had intended, and after the fact, you maybe regretted it, right? You were maybe frustrated, angry, anxious, something didn't align with you that became such a powerful emotion that you had no control over your response. But after the fact, you decided, maybe I could have done that a little bit differently. I regret responding that way, and you're backtracking. So we want to help you improve that so that your responses are better thought out, better controlled, and they can still be instantaneous. It's just we're going to help you retrain your brain, reprogram your brain, as I talk about all the time. You have the ability, you weren't born with all your automatic unconscious habits, you developed them, right? They were developed through your experience. So why can't you do that deliberately, right? Okay, we find that mastery in leadership is about taking that and doing things deliberately to yourself, to your brain, to develop new behaviors, to develop new techniques. It's really what we teach people. This is the neuroscience aspect of what we do. And, it wasn't around 100 years ago. It wasn't around when a lot of those old assessments were created. But that's why we also developed AccuMatch and behavior intelligence to leverage the new sciences and new technologies. And as we progress and move forward, there's just so much that's coming down the line, new assessments, leveraging AI in the right way, understanding the pros and cons, the human element versus the data side of AI. AI is really about the data, the information. What we do with that information is really the leadership intelligence that takes humanity into consideration, takes context into consideration. So there's a lot coming, a lot happening, and stay tuned for that throughout this year. There was a lot of information that we are going to be sharing with you. I'm going to be sharing with you. Quick mention, we're having a weekly podcast as well with some amazing coaches sharing their knowledge and experience. That those are happening on Fridays, same time slots. So do tune into those. We don't know everything, right? And so reaching out to all these amazing coaches from around the world is allowing us to also tie in what coaches are doing in the leadership area that complements what we're talking about in leadership intelligence, behavior intelligence, and so on. All right. So when you don't have the emotional mastery in place, these are the potential impacts that can occur to you and your business, your organization, your culture. You lose credibility, your quality of decisions, you're second guessing things. Maybe you're making hasty decisions. You're not really taking on board information and soliciting input from other people. We've talked about that in previous sessions. Do go back and watch those. The impact on your team, the culture, the performance is impacted negatively when you don't have your emotion in check or mastery in place. Energy drain, we don't talk about that, but the psychological impact on people transfers into energy, right? So when people are excited and motivated, they're super energetic, and sometimes we talk about people are super excited when they go home about what they're doing, and they're negatively excited about coming to work. That's the thing we want to fix. That's an emotion, right? And it's triggered by the leadership styles. All right, so some myths, right? Most leaders try to control emotion. They suppress it. They start to realize all of those negative impacts and they bottle it up, right? And eventually that's going to either implode and get stressed and have to take time out to recover, or they'll explode because they've been bottling up so much and then they're just outbursts, right? We want to try and avoid that. The emotion that impacts business is very critical here. So control versus mastery. Right? Control is about fighting the emotion, trying to suppress it, trying to project a calm demeanor, right? All of these things really rely on willpower, trying to suppress things. And today we're going to talk about mastery in a different way. What if you could leverage it as a power, right? As a strength, as something that can really engage and excite and motivate and so forth. But there are techniques to get you there. It's not going to be, a magic pill that you take and you suddenly become a master of managing your emotions in a positive way, right? So we're going to work with it. We're going to try and understand it. I'm going to show you some techniques on how to get that to a level where it serves you well, it serves the team well, the culture, the business, and so on. Wouldn't that be great, right? Okay, so let's dive into some of that. Staying calm. I talked about that. I joke about that. I changed my tonality. I moved from my upper chest, speaking at high note, to a deeper, more calm, right? Yeah, that might work for a little while, but calm is not effective leadership. Okay, calm is just for you. Right? And yes, people can observe it, but is it good leadership? It's not. Okay, so we will explain a little bit more about that today. And again, the book will help you do that. Common leadership triggers, and you probably come across these. I've talked about some of them already. Just listing a few again. Some of these, I've experienced myself. I've run lots of events, presentations, large groups, large meetings, presenting to very large environments, audiences, and sometimes you get the hecklers, right? And how do you deal with that? The public humiliation almost that you project onto yourself. Why are you questioning me, right? Team members missing deadlines. That happens a lot. I've talked often about misunderstanding, the excuse that gets used. I didn't understand what you wanted. We have it's just a misunderstanding. Sweeping it under the carpet. There are past sessions where I've talked deeply about that. There are blogs on that I've shared with you. so you can do that. Feeling micromanaged, whether you are micromanaging somebody else or you're feeling like your board of directors or your management is micromanaging you, that's really, again, one of those things that can be a trigger for people as an emotional trigger. Having your expertise challenged. I still do that, right? And so I have had to learn how to deal with that and to embrace that and to be open to that feedback, if you like. Witnessing unfair or inefficiencies and trying to, correct that because it doesn't match your rules. I call it the humanity side. Allow yourself to be human, but don't forget you need to allow other people to be human. People will make mistakes. We are human, right? Even AI, we're doing so much work with AI, it makes so many mistakes, and people get upset about it and they don't use it. They don't understand how to actually work with people, little less AI, which is more like a robot, right? Mm-hmm. Conflict triggers people, and really it's the misunderstanding that happens within conflict. Conflict is often about projected intention, like we can read minds, right? So people get angry when their values are misaligned, or they project a intended what's the word I'm trying to think of? An intended hurt or damage or conflict that's resulting from a disagreement and so on. So allowing people to shift across different situations, different perspectives, that's the word I was looking for, allows us to then deal with those situations much better. So which ones activate you the most, right? I've given you a few examples. Maybe take notes, and we're going to talk about how you might handle those differently. Here is an example. The typical thing that happens is you have a trigger, right? What's a trigger? It's something you observe that you take in through your senses. That's the physiology side of things. You hear it, you see it, or if somebody hits you, that can be a trigger as well. It triggers an emotion, which is internal. Some people think they feel it in their gut. Some people feel it in their head. It doesn't matter where that comes from for you. Then the thought story that takes place causes you to then behave and react in a specific way. Right? So this is what we call often the feedback loop, that our humanity is constantly taking input from the world around us. We process it, we deal with it, we act on it, and that's often shows up. Nobody can see the emotion that's going on inside you. They can only observe the behavior of how you respond to that trigger, right? How you act it out. And the example there is, the missed deadlines. You feel the tension in your chest, right? Some people feel it in their head. You get frustrated. They don't respect my time. What do they think they're doing? All of these wrong stories that take place that then result in a sharp email or an outburst and so on. Now, we want to learn mastery is about figuring out at what point you can stop that process from continuing and ending up into a negative situation. So The 4 levels of mastery. The basic level, if you like, you could put these the other way around. Level 1 is you're just reactive, right? You haven't really learned to master that. That's almost the reptilian brain. We talk about it in neuroscience. The almost caveman response. When you're threatened, right? You do things that you might regret later. And so level 2 is what we talk about as meta level, is recognizing after the fact, right? Oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So it's the recognition, but it's usually after something happens. Level 3 is our ability to catch ourselves before we get into that situation. It's the pause, right? I teach a lot of people on sales techniques, coaching techniques, and one of the hardest things for people to learn is that pause. They just want to puke out information onto others. They want to project knowledge. It makes them feel good and so forth. But the most important thing isn't about you sharing your wisdom. It's about helping the other person gain wisdom, right? Okay, or helping the other person make a buying decision, as opposed to you pushing a sale onto them that they might regret later on. And level 4 is really having that in control, and that's the mastery level that we talk about. So most leaders, can go from level 1 to level 2, but very few ever get to level 4. But it's not hard to do. And so what I'm going to share with you today are some practice sessions that you can do that allow you to shift through those levels to actually be at level 4. You may not stay there all the time. You still are human. You are going to have situations that just trigger something from your past, or an emotion that's so strong, but we're going to teach you how to get that under control. This is what's known as the FIRE method. Maybe you've heard of that before. F is about feeling the emotion fully. Okay, and I'll dive into each of these in a moment. I is about investigating the message that is coming from that emotion. What's that telling you? Okay. R is to regulate your response. It's that pause, right? And then E is engaging with intention, or if you like, you can replace the engaging with the behavior that is aligned with your objectives, right? So let's look at the first one. Instead of "I shouldn't feel this way," which is a negative, really not helpful. If you take out the "not" part, it's just reinforcing that I should feel this way, right? Because the brain doesn't often recognize "not," but. However, all of those words, if you followed the different teachings around law of attraction and so forth, NLP, you would know that those words, our brain doesn't really process them. They process the opposite. So we're going to replace that with, "I notice I'm feeling frustrated, angry, or anxious." Okay, so the first thing you need to do is this self-awareness, right? To be aware that, I'm noticing a little bit of a frustration around this situation, right? So this is the emotional awareness without a self-judgment. You're not judging yourself when you do that. You're just saying, I'm just noticing an uneasiness. Okay. And that allows you to then process that information. That's where we get into the second step of that. But the practice is, if you can name that emotion, you can tame it, right? So that ability to take in the information as data as opposed to just responding or judging, right? Okay. And now you can investigate it. Well, this is the message part. So, what's this telling me? What values are being threatened? What beliefs are being threatened? How is my project, my objectives suffering? What's really underneath or beneath this trigger? Okay, so I've identified that I'm feeling something, and now I'm taking time to process it. Now, you're not going to be able to do that day one, instantly before actually responding. This is all going to start as after the fact, and I'll talk about the process and the stages that you're going to go through shortly. But this allows you to understand it, right? When you understand something, you have a much better chance of acting differently, responding differently, and regulating it. And I always recommend the 4-4-6-2 breathing technique. You breathe in 4 count, hold it 4 count, breathe out completely, pause for 2, and repeat that. Now, I created a blog on this particular breathing technique because we often talk about it as meditation. It's actually a neuroscience method behind that. When we do that, our dopamine, our cortisol levels change. We are actually taking our brain out of a fight and flight mode into a calm state. Okay, it shifts our physiology completely and allows us to think clearly. When we're in fight and flight because of an emotion, our amygdala's kicked in, our frontal lobe has stopped processing. We are not in a state of being able to think clearly. Okay, and so the breathing has been proven through neuroscience or fMRI and so forth, actually reduces all of that and allows us to then be calm, but in a state of thinking clearly. Okay. So then you can get into looking and questioning the perspective that other people might have, the perspective that the situation might have. You can reframe your own response. What if I respond differently? And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And you might also be more open-minded about possible choices, decisions, etc. So it's all very important for you to manage those processes, and that's why the FIRE technique is such a powerful tool. Then you can decide on what behavior you're going to apply in that situation, right? So you need to think about, what outcome do I really want to have here? Is it a one-on-one conversation? Is it an outcome about a project, an objective? Is it a culture? Is it performance? Is it just your own results? What are the outcomes and objectives that you want to have? And what's the best approach for you that serves you well in that situation? How can you model the emotional intelligence or behavior to be aligned with what you want to achieve? Does it align with your leadership values? And other people's perspectives are important in that. So you need to consider that. So action is a behavior, right? And again, I repeat this, people can't interpret your emotion. They can only observe it, right? And because it's observable, therefore it must be a behavior, right? So behavior intelligence is the underpinning of leadership intelligence, okay? So if you want to be a great leader, a great coach, you need to learn more and more about yourself, your awareness, but more importantly, how you are acting it out, how you are being observed, right? If you had a mirror and you were looking at your actions and your behaviors in a mirror, right? How would you respond to you? Yeah, cool stuff. So the pause button. And this is the first step to taking a conscious effort and practicing it enough times so it becomes automatic unconscious. You want to be able to do this at the mastery level, which means you need to be able to do it at an unconscious, competent level. Okay, but it doesn't start that way. You can't suddenly learn to brush your teeth. You have to be reminded. You have to, your parents catch you going to bed without brushing your teeth and go, "Hey, did you brush your teeth?" No, right? So there is that pause. Sometimes it's an external one. We've talked about that in past sessions, how you can get other people to help you with that process by, giving you visual cues, or, some people use a rubber band, all kinds of things that have been used in psychology and therapy that are really just simple things that anybody can apply. They don't need to be therapy oriented. They're just really helping you to catch yourself. To be able to change something, first the pause needs to happen. So stop, breathe, feel, choose. Start with something small. Okay. So we had a client that was often triggered by a specific person on their team because the leader was more creative, innovative, and that person was what we refer to as quality control and contrary, and that person would immediately jump in with all the things that could go wrong. And that just was a fuse for that person. So we set it up that one of their VPs then sat in the opposite side of the room, and when that happened, they gave them a visual cue that allowed them to go, okay, I'm not going to get triggered by this. I'm going to say thank you, and can you please hold that till we get to it later on, right? And so the pause is important, but sometimes you can't do it on your own. Okay? Reframing, your situation, your response. Asking yourself these questions will help you to reframe a little bit. Reframing gets used around quite a lot. It's really about giving yourself a different frame of reference to work from that allows you to respond differently. Okay, and so often we talk about it. Tell me about a situation where you responded to that differently that really worked out very, very positively. Can you bring that into your frame right now so that you can actually feel it, you can see it, you can sense it, and you can use it to your advantage. And we do that sometimes by asking these coaching type questions. You know, how will your response feel in 10 minutes time, in 10 hours time, in 10 days time, 10 years time, whatever? Will you still look at it as something that was positive, right? If you were telling this story to a friend, and this is actually an amazing tool when you verbalize something and you actually share that situation, that story with somebody else. Your brain is processing it from an outside perspective because you're sharing it with somebody else. It allows you to reframe while you're actually explaining it. It's a really powerful tool. Try it. So there are many things that you can do. I'm not going to spend too much time on all of those, but what we're really trying to do is to shift our perspective, look at different ways that could have been handled, to change the emotional intensity, okay, to bring in as I mentioned earlier, a frame of reference where it was positive and that you can actually use that in repeated situations. Checking your values, right? You need to figure out whether, and a lot of people talk about values as being fixed. They're not fixed. You weren't born with values and beliefs, right? You can challenge them. You can actually question them. You can shift them. You can reprogram them, okay? And so, this really allows us to then, when we look at our values and beliefs, we can also ask the question about somebody else's values and beliefs, right? Is this relevant for that other person? Is this relevant in this situation? What is the alignment to my identity? And do I still believe that that is what I want to achieve, what objective I want to achieve, and so on. Right. So this then ensures that your future self will still respect you, right? If you like putting it that way. Then finally, the energy redirect is then the shift that needs to happen to allow the frustration into a determination to solve a problem, anger in understanding the passion, but a way of actually expressing that, and I'll talk about that, anxiety. Every emotion has a leadership potential. And if you suppress it and don't deal with it, you're actually losing on a very important part of your leadership style, but you need to leverage it the right way. So let's talk about some of those things. Anger as a fuel. So how do you turn anger into something positive? Well, okay. Something important is being threatened. That's the message that you are going through, right? Your drive for justice, protection of team values, whatever the intent is, you need to channel that so that you can have a systematic way of dealing with that, so that it's not just anger, but you deliver it in a way that achieves your objective. And your objective is to protect the team values, maybe the culture of the organization. So unpack the message, right? So it's a fuel. Don't just stop it completely. Understand it and figure out how to use it. Right? I'm angry. Why am I angry? Oh, okay, because this happened. Well, how can I now work with the team to take them on a journey to make sure that those values are being respected? Okay. Frustration. Again, it's the gap between your ideal outcome, your desired objective, and the current situation. So, in order to help do that, you might want to get into more problem-solving energy, helping people do that, diagnose it, maybe do some post-critique, and then eventually getting to a pre-critique, right? That's the evolution that takes place when you do enough post-critique of what went right, what went wrong. You're then able to do that before you start making a decision or you start a project. Anxiety, right, is really about the risk, the fears, the consequences, what could go wrong, what we're trying to avoid, not maybe achieving our goals, right? And the leadership strategy is about careful planning. We recently embarked on some development projects with AI and so forth. And because it's all new, we didn't know what was going to happen, right? But through the learning and the experience, we pressed pause, we did a reset and re-engineered the way we approach AI and use it as a tool that allows us to now create very robust systems with almost zero defect because of that learning, that analysis that we did by doing that. So the humanity side of things is we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen in future. And so sometimes we get anxious about things that could happen, but we don't have the crystal ball to do that. So you might have to experience it in order to see what happened, what goes wrong, do it in a safe environment before launching it publicly, for instance. So those are ways of dealing with that. So, like I said, there was a lot to cover today, so no apology, but let me just wrap it up here. So you now have some practice sessions. If you get into the morning and evening exercises, right? Morning, you want to reflect on some of the things that have happened in the past, maybe look at your schedule for the day, look at what emotions might come up and how you're going to deal with those, right? What emotions are likely to be triggered? How am I going to respond? Do some preliminary preparation, okay? Do your weekly FIRE behavior intelligence. I'm going to switch this from just always talking about emotional intelligence because people can't read your emotion. I know I'm repeating myself. It's the behavior that they respond to, and that's their trigger, right? So your behavior triggers somebody else, their behavior triggers you. You can't read minds, so the emotion is the underlying things that happen that we need to understand and unpack in order to express ourselves differently, to behave differently. You've learned the FIRE process. Just take one and transform that. Use your colleagues, use different ways of preparing yourself for a session, maybe before each session. Even, a presentation like this, I have a process that I go through before every presentation. And so you can actually do that before meetings, before projects. You can develop your own techniques. Weekly mastery, monthly mastery, it takes time. You've got to practice these things. You can't just do it once and be fit. You can't go to the gym and work out one time. It's going to hurt, right? Okay. And if you don't practice it, it's not going to be muscle memory. It's not going to be automatic. Right? And that's really the purpose of practice, 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 practice. We talk about it consistently. And what it does is it reprograms your brain, right? So if you don't want to think about it as taking control of your brain that freaks you out, oh, I can't do that, and just think of it as developing new habits, okay? And powerful ones that are really empowering for you and your team. But it can only happen through practice, okay? And it doesn't have to be perfect practice. I know some people talk about that, perfect practice, no, you need to start small. You're going to make mistakes. You'll need to allow yourself to be human. You're going to fall off the wagon sometimes and revert back to your triggers. You just got to catch that and pick yourself up and go, hey, that was just a one-off situation. I know how to deal with this, right? It's the same with exercising. A lot of people, they get motivated, they exercise, and they're good at it, and then something happens, they stop, and they find it difficult to get back onto it. My motto is, yeah, I'm human. That's going to happen, right? But my routine is I exercise every day, right? So do that. Week 1, week 2, you're going to struggle with things. This is the exercising for the first time. Your muscles are going to ache the next day. You're going to be sore for that first 1 or 2 weeks while you develop those things where you're starting to catch yourself, right? That takes, repetition, right? Now, if you do it often every day, multiple times a day, you'll get there quicker than if you just do it once a day, right? So practice, practice, practice. That's how we develop in neuroscience. We talk about neural networks and myelinating sheaths. That's really turning what is initially just a path to a freeway, right? Where it's just so fast, instantaneous, and so on. Maybe that's a topic for another day. All right, so when your emotions become your superpower, you really reach that level of mastery. Okay, you can still have those emotions. You can still feel those emotions. You are human. You're not going to remove those, right? But you're going to learn their value. You're going to learn how to leverage them. You're going to learn the power and the passion that excites other people and motivates them and builds a powerful culture, right? And, we often throw labels around and we have all these cliches and caption phrases. Walk the talk is one of them. What does it really mean? What does that look like? What does it sound like? What's the behavior that is around walk the talk, right? And this is where the emotion can really be powerful in an expression like that, okay? Because of the behavior that comes from that. Turn your difficult moments into teaching opportunities, teaching for yourself, teaching for other people. When you do it, other people want to learn how to do it too. Right? So make sure that you remember that. Next week, I'm back on track. So there is more to cover. We're still in part 1 of the book. We're going to do chapter 4, and then we'll wrap it up the following week by doing a recap of the 4 weeks. We're going to talk about the non-negotiable principles, measurable results, credibility, etc. This is all part of the part 1, which is to do with the self-awareness and the impact on others. So I hope you got some important takeaways today. The myth that we talked about, the impact that it has on you, your organization, your team. We've given you some tools to use. The FIRE method, the pause, the message, the understanding the message and figuring out a different technique, creating that feedback loop that allows you to improve that and to work with that. All right. So your emotional intelligence mastery, this is your homework. Okay. Start working. Pick one thing, right? Pick one pattern that you're going to work with. Figure out how you're going to manage that, right? And do that for 7 days. And then on day 8, right, pick another one. Or, do a feedback loop. How well did you do? Do you need to do more with that? Right? Okay. So questions for you to maybe think about. You're welcome to ask these questions online. I'll watch for them, right? What are your specific triggers? Do you know enough about the FIRE method? If you don't, you can always look it up, or you can watch this video again. And we're adding lots of little assessments that you can do online if you reach out to me. I'll just put my info up here very quickly. I think it's this one. Let's see. Yep. All right. So you can access those and join me on my next session. I look forward to seeing you online, and it's been great to have you with us today. I leave you with that thought. Don't forget, watch for the book launch. I hope you can help us in making this #1 bestseller. And not that that's important, get the value from it, share it with other leaders, and let's all improve what we do, how we do it. And thank you, and see you next week.